When it comes to actually filling in your exam paper, presentation does count, although it doesn't have explicit marks made available for it. I'm going to go through 2 exam papers, both of which contain exactly the same answers, but one of which is filled in well, and one of which is filled in badly. And the badly filled in paper is going to get fewer marks simply because we can't work out what or where the answers are. So if we start with the good paper, the name and all the front information is filled in correctly. The exam numbers are filled in correctly. This means whole exam numbers. You don't want to fill in 1A, 1B, 1C, just 1, 2, 3, 4, because we've got 4 questions. Make sure you fill in your name on the front of the exam paper. This does sometimes get forgotten, and it's just embarrassing for you, the student. So if we look inside the exam paper, we have each question started on a separate page. If it's a small question, you can get away with fitting maybe 2 to a page, but each question should have at least half a page to itself minimum. So here you can see, because they're quite small questions, each one has got half a page, and that's fine. But they should be no more than 2 questions per page. On our first question, we've shown not only the 3 separate parts of the question separately, we've also shown our working for each question. This is important because it means that even if you get the final answer wrong, you can still get partial credit. If we can spot where you've gone wrong, you might get marks up until that point. So always show your working. Question B, 1B, we've been asked for 3 separate things. So in this case, we've labelled the 3 individual parts. We've said exactly where the problem was and given a description of it. When we came to write pseudocode, we've made sure to write clearly on separate lines with sensible variable and function names, and we've made sure to indent our code. In languages like Python, this is particularly important because the indentation affects how your code runs, but you should be indenting your code all the time, just so that it's more legible for the person doing the marking. If you make a mistake with your answer, you don't need to scribble over it. A single line through the mistake is more than enough. If you cross through the line and it turns out later that that was the correct answer, you may still get marks for it if it's legible. It depends on the exam and the examiner. But there's no point in throwing these potential marks away. We've very clearly written out the 2 parts of the question, explicitly making sure that we hit every single requirement. When doing sections like this, where we're meant to label multiple parts, we've made sure to clearly label each part of the question so that we can understand exactly which part of the question we're addressing. If you run out of space on a page, don't just jam it in on the next page. Just write clearly at the bottom that the question is continued later in the book. That's all we need to know. Again, we've made mistakes here, so we've just crossed out with a couple of lines, and that's more than enough to indicate that we should ignore this part of the question unless we want to see your working on the way through. It's said that we're continued later in the book. So if we turn to later in the book, it says continued, and the rest of the question is found here. It is not possible to run out of paper in an exam. If you fill up one book, you can ask for more paper and you will be given another book. You have infinite paper, so you might as well use it. When it comes to writing code, If it explicitly asks for comments and doc strings, then those are worth marks. If it doesn't explicitly ask for comments or doc strings, then they've never lost people marks. So if you want to add comments, go ahead, it won't hurt.